Juliet Daniel is a professor and cancer biologist at McMaster University. Juliet's research led to her discovery of a new gene, queso, coined from the popular Caribbean music calypso. Her team currently studies the difficult-to-treat triple-negative breast cancers, TNBC, that are most prevalent in young Black women. Juliet has been recognized for her research and youth mentorship by multiple awards, including the UWI Chancellor's Award, a Hamilton YWCA Women of Distinction Award, and a Harry Jerome Award. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Juliet Daniel.
So today I'm going to tell you a little bit of the story of my journey from Barbados to a professor at McMaster University. And this is my tongue-in-cheek title. This photo is actually taken 10 minutes from my home. I grew up 10 minutes from the beach in Barbados, and this is where my family still lives. So I grew up in a low-income family in Barbados, even though we were living near the beach. And I was always fascinated with the human body, natural world. And my parents saw that I had potential. I excelled in math and physics, and sadly, no one encouraged me to become an engineer, no one whatsoever. Instead, they equated physics and math with becoming a physician. And so I was told, oh, you should do biology and become a doctor. So because no one in my family had actually gone to university, and there was no one to advise me, I said, okay, sure. And but the one thing I did know was I wanted to do research and to find a cure for some global disease. I didn't know which disease at the time, and to get the Nobel Prize. I had no idea how to achieve any of those things, but that was my goal as a teenager. So as a family, as I said, we were a low-income family. We didn't have money. We didn't have a car, actually, when I was growing up. We didn't get a telephone till I was 16. And yeah, this was pre-internet, dinosaur era kind of thing. And so basically, for me to attend university, my parents scrounged and saved every single penny they had so that if I wanted to go overseas to university, I could. And so when the time came for me to do that, I decided I would go, even though I was incredibly afraid and nervous because I'd never really left home or lived anywhere other than Barbados, and I didn't know how that was going to work out. But I had relatives in Montreal, and so I thought, that will be my safe haven. So one of the points I want to make here is that sometimes you just have to move out of your comfort zone to reach your full potential, because I really believe if I had stayed in Barbados, chances are I would have just gone to the local medical school and become a physician and not do the work that I'm doing right now. Because in Barbados, it's challenging to conduct scientific research just because we're a small island with only 250,000 people, not a huge economy or infrastructure to do biomedical research. But our current prime minister, who was a high school friend and classmate of mine, and the first female prime minister of Barbados, she wants to change that, and she has been on my case to change that since I was a professor. After 5 years of being a professor, she wanted me to come back and fix that. So we're going to work on that. So I made the trip from Barbados to Canada. As I said, I didn't know anyone. This was pre-internet. Had no idea what Canada was like. Thought it really was going to be lots of snow and igloos. Thankfully, it wasn't. I went to Queen's University, and another point I want to make is never underestimate, for any of the educators and leaders of academic institutions, never underestimate the way you treat people. As I said, I came from a low-income family. We didn't have any money, so I couldn't come to Canada to see the different universities. When I applied to the 5 or 6 universities in Canada, everyone sent me a little card saying, thank you for applying. But Queen's University was the only university that took the time to send my family and I an envelope every 2 weeks without fail with a map of Kingston. 2 weeks later, it would be pictures of the campus. 2 weeks later, it would be a newspaper from Kingston. 2 weeks later, it would be newspaper from campus. Like every 2 weeks, we got some kind of information about Kingston and Queens. So when the time came to make a decision, my family and I, it was kind of a no-brainer. It was like, you're going to Queens. We have no idea what Waterloo looks like, or Guelph, or McMaster, or U of T. And so it's like, okay, I'm going to Queens. And so that's how I ended up at Queens. And basically, there I had a wonderful time. And but again, because I came from a small island, I didn't know about all these different career options. Everyone in Barbados pretty much was encouraging young students to become doctors, lawyers, engineers, accountants, or high school teachers. Those were the 5 careers that all young students, regardless of gender, were being encouraged to pursue. And so I get to Queens, and I'm like, oh my God, there's all these career options. What am I going to do? And so these are some of the advice here, which I think I put in the wrong order. But anyway, so being an engineer was an option that I'd never, well, as I said, I hadn't thought about it because no one in Barbados told me or encouraged me to pursue that. I had friends that were studying pharmacy to become pharmacists. I learned about occupational therapy, physiotherapy, optometry, all these careers that I had never, ever heard of growing up in Barbados. Of course, we had heard about marine biology because we're on an island, and McGill had an actual marine biology station in Barbados, and it's still there, so we all thought we could be marine biologists. But all these other careers I'd never heard about. Being a bioethics lawyer, like that's something that's becoming quite hot and trendy right now, because with all of the big data that's being generated, all of the data being generated from 23andMe and Ancestry.ca, we're really going to need a lot of folks with different diverse careers to address all of these new avenues and careers that are developing that we didn't even think about or anticipate 20, 30 years ago. So physician's assistant is another one, a medical illustrator. Some of you might love art and you love science and you haven't figured out a way to combine those two gifts and skills that you have. Medical illustrator, all those beautiful pictures in your textbooks or slideshows, those are made by students, or well, not students, people who love science and love art, but we don't have enough medical illustrators out there. So that's another career that you can think of. So there's just lots of careers. With the surge in artificial intelligence as well, that's as many, I think Vanessa is into robotics, and that's another big career that's booming, but we're also seeing a huge need for folks skilled in cybersecurity with all of the data breaches that we're getting. So there's just so many career options, which is a good thing and a bad thing because it can also be incredibly overwhelming. And sometimes I say to my students who are overwhelmed with all this choice that I'm glad I'm not your age, because it really is sometimes too much choice and it can be really scary and intimidating. So, but as all our panelists just pointed out, you have all of us here to talk to. You have lots of other mentors, your teachers. You have way more mentors than you probably even appreciate. And with the internet as well and social media, you can reach out to so many people to get advice and guidance. So at Queens, as I said, I was having a wonderful time. And then in my 4th year, everything kind of came crashing down. Vanessa kind of went through some of what Vanessa went through personally. So my next door neighbor in Barbados died of breast cancer. A month after that, my mom was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. And then 5 days before my convocation from Queens, my mom passed away from ovarian cancer. So up until that point, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was considering medical school or graduate school. And when my mom passed away, I kind of thought, I do not want to see a hospital. I do not want to see a single sick person. I do not want to have to tell a person their family member is going to die. So I kind of knew that, but I still didn't know much about graduate school, and the internet still wasn't around. But everyone told me the warmest place in Canada was Vancouver. And so sight unseen, didn't know a soul, I applied to UBC, packed up and moved because the novelty of snow had completely worn off by that point. So I packed up and moved to Vancouver, had a wonderful PhD experience there, made friends from all over the world. And at the end of that, I had to make a decision again, and I was still looking for somewhere warmer than Vancouver. So London, England wasn't really warmer, but I loved Europe, so I thought, well, maybe I'll go to London for a postdoc, or San Francisco, which I also really loved. And then I thought, well, maybe I'll go to the deep south where it's supposed to be blistering hot. And so I actually ended up in Memphis, Tennessee, against the wishes of most of my family because of the stereotypes of racism, et cetera. But I was, being this like trailblazer, how hard can it be? They can't be racist in 1994, surely not. But apparently they still exist in 1994. And so my first 2 weeks were absolutely horrible. I was treated completely like I got all the racist treatment you can get. I couldn't open a bank account, I couldn't get a driver's license, and I couldn't get my social security card. And it's only when I literally was sobbing at the bank and said, well, I just want to open a bank account and deposit $3,000. I don't want to take your money. She calmed me down and said, well, why do you even want to move to Memphis from Canada? And I said, well, I'm here to work at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. And she said, oh, well, what are you going to do there? Are you going to be a secretary or a nurse? The typical response to a woman, and in my case, a black woman. I said, no, I'm a researcher. I have a PhD. And she goes, well, why didn't you say that? Here you go. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like this, wow. So that was my introduction to the South. But Memphis is a great place for a 4-day weekend, just saying. It is really a great day for a 4-day weekend. The Civil Rights Museum is there, which is built on the site where Martin Luther King was assassinated, and it is an incredible museum. And I would like to think that 25 years later, it's much better than when I was living there. So it was while I was in Memphis at St. Jude's Hospital that I actually cloned and discovered a new gene that played a role in cell-cell adhesion, which was the reason I went to Memphis, because I saw the opportunity there compared to San Francisco or London to work on a project that very few people in the world were working on at the time. So as I said, I really actually wanted to go to San Francisco, but I made the decision to go to Memphis because I was thinking long-term of my future career rather than short-term having fun in San Francisco, but then having to be really competitive for the rest of my life if I had gone to San Francisco. So I chose to go to Memphis specifically because I knew that it was a niche field and there weren't many people studying cell adhesion from the perspective that my supervisor was, and that I could possibly make some kind of discovery that I could then establish my own research lab, which fortunately I did. And as is mentioned in my bio, I cloned and discovered this gene. My supervisor had also discovered his gene, but he had named his gene just the molecular weight P120. So when I discovered my gene, he's like, please give it a really cool name because I regret just naming it after the molecular weight. So once I confirmed that I could call it absolutely anything I wanted, I said, okay, can I call it Kaiso, which is Caribbean music, and it's the slang for calypso, which is the music that I absolutely love. It's the music I played every single day. It's the music I pretty much converted the whole lab to loving. Even our Chinese technicians would play it on the weekends when I wasn't there. So it was very appropriate that we called it Kaiso after that. So I spent, as I said, 6 years in Tennessee, 3 years at St. Jude Children's Hospital, and then Al and I moved the entire lab to Vanderbilt University because there were more opportunities there. And then in 1999, I moved to McMaster University to become an assistant professor. And I've been there now 20 years running my lab. And it's the city of Waterfalls, so it's quite pretty. Just a little ad there. So in my lab, we study 2 types of cancer predominantly. We study breast cancer and colon cancer. And we also use molecular cell biology approaches, and we do some developmental projects using frogs, and we also use mice for some of our cancer work and also some of our developmental biology work. So as mentioned in my bio as well, at the moment, one of our major interests is a type of breast cancer known as triple-negative breast cancer. Breast cancers are actually classified and diagnosed based on the expression of 3 proteins or biomarkers: the estrogen receptor, progesterone receptor, and the HER2 or human epidermal growth factor receptor 2. Most breast cancers will either express estrogen receptor or ER or HER2, and the current therapies for breast cancer are targeting those 2 specific proteins. However, as the name triple-negative breast cancer indicates, triple-negative breast cancers do not express any of those 3 biomarkers, so there are no drugs that treat triple-negative breast cancers. So any woman diagnosed with triple-negative breast cancer can only have your standard chemotherapy and radiotherapy, but no specific therapy that will target the triple-negative breast cancer tumor. Those 2 therapies will just target any highly proliferating cell in the body. So what's really interesting and piqued my interest in this is the fact that it's most prevalent in young Black and Hispanic women. And unfortunately, most of the studies and the data on this come from the US, where they conduct and collect race-based data for all diseases. Unfortunately, here in Canada, we do not. But I think there's a push now and a recognition that we have to start collecting this data because we're doing a disservice to some populations that may have predispositions to certain illnesses. So, as I said, I got interested in this, again, by going to a conference and hearing it at a conference and thinking, this is bizarre. And because I had always, as I said, wanted to do some kind of global research, give back to my community, and definitely give back to the Caribbean, I thought this might be an interesting project to study using my Barbadian population to see whether this subtype of breast cancer was prevalent in Barbados and impacting young Barbadian women just like it was in North America. So it turns out triple-negative breast cancer, the incidence in North America is about 22%, but in West Africa, Nigeria and Ghana, it's 50 to 80% of the women there have this type of breast cancer. And since there's no treatment, that means the mortality rate from this is really, really high. So I have this little poster on my door to remind me every day that this is a motivation for doing this as well, to make sure that, you know, your children and you guys, ladies will not have to deal with a diagnosis of breast cancer. So at the moment we have collected tissues from women in Barbados, in Nigeria, and Jamaica, and we're using those tissues to look at the expression of Kaizo, which, as it turns out, is highly expressed in triple-negative breast cancers, not just from Black women, but from any woman that has triple-negative breast cancer, but there is more Kaizo in Black women than there are in Caucasian women. And that's something that we're trying to understand, whether Kaizo is driving that high incidence and mortality rate in Black women compared to Caucasian women that have triple-negative breast cancer. So everyone's talked about their journey, and I tried to make this quickly last night. It's not, I'm gonna remake it next time. But just to show you that none of us, I don't think any professional that you see or you encounter has had a journey that looks like a nice straight line up to the top. And if they did, then kudos to them. But this is pretty much to show you that, you know, everyone's journey is complex, and we've had ups and downs and challenges. And and what you're seeing here, and it's my next slide, is basically this iceberg illusion, which hopefully you've seen before, and if not, hopefully you'll take a good look at it. That many of you see us here, and you see other successful people, male or female, and you're thinking that could never be you. And as I said, like many growing up, I never thought that I would be a professor at a Canadian university. I definitely never thought I would be standing on a stage speaking, because I absolutely hated public speaking, like absolutely hated it. So much so that during my PhD, when I had to do my comprehensive exams, I actually failed the oral component of my comprehensive exam because I answered every question with a question. So they would ask me, I'm just gonna make this really simple, what color is the sky? And I would say, the sky is blue? And then they would say, okay, can you tell me how many fingers you have? Maybe 5? Every single question I answered that way. And so they made me repeat the oral with confidence. And by that point, I was really pissed and angry, so I did. Because everyone else that failed some component of their comprehensive got to do a written submission as their makeup, but they insisted that I was the only one that had to do an oral because it was about my confidence and not my knowledge. So again, this is part of my squiggles. So what you see in front of you most of the times are just folks that were able to overcome those challenges, build resilience, and fight through everything to get to where we are. And it's not easy even being here. For 20 years, I've been the only Black female professor, Black female scientist at McMaster, and that has been exhausting because students hear about me and find me, and I'm learning to say no. It's hard because they're very, like many of these students want to be encouraged. They've never seen a Black professor. They've never had a Black female professor. Like, it's just, I'm like, I don't know, a unicorn, I guess, to them. So it's tiring sometimes, but I want to do it because I want to see more diversity in science, because many of these students have so many skills and talents and gifts. And some of them are so creative and way smarter than I was at their age. And so I'm trying to encourage them. And yeah. So finally, these are tips that I give to my students in my classes. So this is one that I encountered recently that I really like, tips from an eagle. So try to soar to new heights whenever you can. But like an eagle, just keep an eye on what's happening around you, ahead of you, everywhere. Swoop down when you can on any opportunities that you see that you think would be worthwhile, and I'll rise above all the challenges, the negativity that you may encounter, because you will encounter it, especially if you're ambitious. Ambitious women tend to encounter more negativity than their peers that are males. So that's just the reality that we have to accept. and it just means we're smarter and tougher because we survive. And spread your wings, find a career where you're going to thrive and really excel and be happy. And as I said, if you find that you love 2 or 3 different things, think about a way to marry all of those things into a new career, because as I said, bioethics law wasn't something that existed before. So there are careers that don't exist now that will exist in the future, and maybe you could be the pioneer, the trailblazer for that particular career. And one of my favorite quotes is, it's your attitude and not your aptitude that determines your altitude. So I've had students that were really, really gifted and smart, but they had such negative attitudes that the experiments never worked. And then I've had students that were so positive, so charismatic, that their experiments worked because they came in thinking everything would work, and again, like Hin said, it was about mindset. Their mindset was completely about growth and problem solving, and rather than negativity. So this is one of my favorite quotes for all my classes. And along the way, you have fun, and you get to interact with a bunch of really cool young people as a professor all the time. This is our team, Pirates of the Caribbean. We run and raise money for breast cancer. So this was us at the local Hamilton run, and I will end there and take your questions.
For one question.
One question.
We're kind of...
My name is Jill. Do you ever find it discouraging to work with something as complex and challenging as cancer?
It's not discouraging because, as I said, I've lost so many people to cancer, and I myself am a cancer survivor, so it's not discouraging. Like, that actually motivates me. And when I was at St. Jude's Hospital, actually, that further fueled my passion, because the way St. Jude Children's Hospital was set up, the research floors were on the 4th and 5th floor, but everyone entered the hospital through the same doors. And St. Jude focused on children's cancers, leukemias, lymphomas, et cetera. And every single morning when you went to work, you had to pass all these little kids and their families waiting. And it was kind of like, if your experiment didn't work the day before and you walked in, you're like, okay, this is why I'm doing this. So it's actually not discouraging, because you know that you're really trying to cure something that has impacted so many families and so many children, that it's not discouraging. What's discouraging is how our current system of academia is set up, where you have to apply for funding to do this research. So that rather than doing the research, you're constantly writing grants and getting rejections, and writing grants and getting rejections, and not doing the research. That's what's the most discouraging part of being an academic cancer researcher. Yeah.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
I'm just going to ask the speed mentors to make a quick exit, just as we're offering thanks again to Juliet for the lovely and very inspiring talk.